Well, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Morning, George.
Hello.
How are you, man?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Just
So,
yeah.
Good times. Hey, that keyboard behind you. Is it a keyboard behind you?
Mhm.
Are you down for tickling the ivories? Is that your MO, or is it someone else in the house?
Yeah, no, that's not me, mate. I was always the guy who wasn't in a band in my group of friends.
Really?
Yeah. I was in a band in high school, but I did vocals, right? So I didn't do an instrument. The band was called Up the Bum, No Babies.
Up the bum, no babies.
Yeah.
That is an arguably the name of a student band.
Yeah.
That
That played punk, very messy punk songs about all sorts of stupid shit.
Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant used to have a theory that you knew if a band was going to be successful if you could do an announcement for them coming on stage on Wembley. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage. Up the bum, no babies. You see, it doesn't work.
Well, it's funny you say that because the music teacher wrote out the schedule for who could use the band room, and I don't know if she was like trying to be the cool, fun teacher, but yeah, she was happy to write our full band name out on the whiteboard.
Hilarious.
Yeah, that was Wellington High. That was a cool school.
What about UTBNB? Did you guys use that? UTBNB? It's like New Kids on the Block, NKOTB, but you guys could be UTBNB.
That's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, not bad.
Maybe I should go back to high school. I mean, I hardly went, so be it. Which is a sort of regret. They seem to have fun there, but yeah, I sort of left when I was 16 because I had way better things to do.
Like what? Like start a band about being up the bum with no babies.
Like just doing stupid shit,
smoking and drinking and
hanging out on Cuba Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So today's a bit of an interesting show. We've got like a bunch of little things to talk about today, and if you are watching and if you are going to watch, a great day for you to get involved because me and George are hanging out together by ourselves today, and we are just going to share some stuff that we've been looking at and go from there and etc. We're talking about a little bit about power prices, a little bit about the gender pay gap. Now, the gender pay gap one's an interesting one because it's quite an important topic, but we're just going to be referencing stuff that we're reading and seeing and asking some questions. It will be something we come back to when we've got some people to answer those questions. And also some other bits and bobs through the morning as well. So yeah, jump in today, get involved today, and we might as well rip into it with actually a conversation based around something we talked about earlier in the week. I was talking about the movie that I wanted to see, which is it's called the reboot of Planet of the Apes. Now, this is not a news story, obviously. This is just something that's been going on. If you're not a fan of Planet of the Apes from 1968, spoiler alert. Because I was with someone last night watching the reboot, realizing that if they didn't know how the first one ends, this wouldn't make as much sense. But then again, you could just watch it if you knew nothing about the first one. But long story short,
when he walks down the beach and there's the
Statue of Liberty. So the long story short is the original 1968 one, they travel through space. They land on a foreign planet, and on that planet is run by apes, and apes and humans are in a different position. So humans are like herd animals running wild, and apes are the civilized, dominant species on the planet. And of course, this Charlton Heston, he gets shot in the neck, so he can't talk. So he gets captured, and then the apes think he's just one of the other humans. But he's a bit different because he's wearing different like clothes and stuff like they weren't wearing. And then there's a very famous scene where they catch him in he escapes from the lab, and they catch him in a net, and they're raising him up the net, and he goes, "Get your hands off me, you damn dirty apes!" And they're like, "What the fuck?" They didn't quite say what the fuck, but so and then it goes on. It's a really good movie, actually. I really like it. I've seen it 3 or 4 times in my life. You should go and see it if you haven't. But I'm about to spoil it for you if you haven't. And they get to the end of the movie, and he escapes again, and he's riding off to get to safety, and he comes across a Statue of Liberty that's kind of fallen down in the sea. It's like the top half of it, and it's broken, and he realizes at that point he's still on Earth. So the spaceship that they took off from went off into space, went through a wormhole, came back to Earth X amount of millions of years later. So understanding that, you then have to understand, oh good, we've got Planet of the Apes porn on the screen right now. Cool. Understanding that, the reboot that comes out, the last 3 movies, is sort of the prequel. So it kind of shows the origins of how these apes got to a point of evolving beyond humans. And there's a couple of really cool parts in the first movie. The first one is there's a launch of astronauts. That's big news around the world, and then those astronauts get lost in space. And obviously they're the astronauts from the first movie that then go off for a couple of million years and come back. So that's in the first and in this new reboot of the series. And there's a bit of a cheesy moment as well where the one of the humans says to one of the one of the humans in this reboot says to one of the apes, "Get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape." Kind of a throwback to the 68 movie. Anyway, there's medical intervention. These apes grow massive intelligence, and that's obviously what they're saying is that's the start. Like that's ground zero for millions of years later when apes are ruling the earth and humans have died off or become thick or whatever the word is. Now I'm telling you all of that because as I said, not a news topic. Well, sort of not. We can tie it back though, because the end of the movie, shall we say, felt quite real after 2 years of a pandemic. So this serum that enhances the intelligence of the apes harms humans, kills humans, right? And that's obviously how the transition to apes being dominant happens as well. And of course, it's a virus, and that might resonate with something that's going on in the world today. And when we were watching the closing scenes, I just kind of went, oh my goodness, this feels very real to me. I'm going to show you the closing scene, and what I'm actually going to do before I show it to you is I'm going to put it in, I'm going to speed it up a little bit, 1.5, just to make sure that doesn't get picked up by an algorithm. We're not sharing any of the actual content, literally just a bit of the credits. And then hopefully they won't get us dragged off the internet for showing you. So have a look at this. The second person to have the virus is an airline pilot. He walks to get on his plane, and he has a bit of blood that drops from his nose, lands on the ground, right? So he's obviously got the virus, right? So he's a pilot, he gets on the plane, and then this, we go to that one. Oh, I haven't shared my screen yet, sorry. There we go. And then this is the closing credits. I've sped it up a little bit. And I've taken the sound off as well. Does this feel familiar at all in any kind of way, shape, form whatsoever? And lands in Europe, I believe. Yep, lands in Europe, and there you go. And lands in, I think it's Africa, and there you go. And lands in, maybe, is it the Middle East we're going to land in now? Or India, top part of India, and there we go. And just after watching that, I'm like, holy moly, that feels very real right about now at the end of that movie. So I watched this thing called Corridor Crew. The Corridor Crew are a group of guys who talk about special effects, and earlier in the week they had an episode where they mentioned this movie, and one of the guys from the Corridor Crew, who was a special effects artist himself, was like, the first time I saw this movie, I could not believe these weren't actual apes. So the realistic nature of these CGI characters. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to see it. So I watched it. So anyway, round story. So that's a very long-winded way of me saying those credits felt very real to me watching those last night, and I've watched the movie, and it was really good. And you guys should check it out for yourself. In fact, if you don't know the ending of 1968 movie, which I've now told you, if you don't, you can still watch it in isolation. It still will work. Sorry.
In the first lockdown, the movie Contagion was one of the most popular movies on Netflix because it follows a virus from China that travels around the world. It's a bit more of a violent virus for cinematic effect, like they have a violent seizure on the ground sort of thing. And that has a very similar scene where Gwyneth Paltrow's character, has just had a one-night stand, and she's at an airport, and in a very cinematic way, it shows how she spreads it. Right, it's sort of from the perspective of basically where the virus would be. It goes from her to the bar worker, and then the bar worker goes home to their very dense flat because she's in Hong Kong or something, right? And it goes home to where they live in these small, very densely populated areas, and then it goes public transport, and very similar to what you've just shown. I remember when the Contagion was like blowing up and trending again, because it's a fairly old movie. It's about a decade old, actually more than a decade old. It felt weird watching. We started watching it and we stopped watching it because it felt weird to see the reality we were in a cinematic way. It felt uncomfortable almost, right? It was like the real had punctured through the screen, so to speak, and it was a sort of jarring feeling. I feel detached enough now to be able to watch it, so maybe I'll swing back around.
Yeah, isn't that something? I'm just looking at Wikipedia now on the latest Bond film. Wasn't the latest Bond film about a world virus and something as well? It was one of the reasons they had to release it a couple of years later. Oh, was it a computer virus?
I'm pretty sure. Oh, no. It was, well, it was sort of like encoded in DNA. So it was sort of, transhuman virus.
Oh, okay. But it was some sort of thing. It was one of the reasons the studio put it off for a couple of years. Obviously, they couldn't finish some bits and pieces because of lockdowns and stuff. But one of the reasons they put it off was what you're saying. Imagine people looking at it and thinking about a virus spreading around the world, whilst a virus was spreading around the world, may not be the best time to perhaps release the movie. So there you go. All right. Shall we get on with some subjects or some topics of the day? And look, why don't we tell people what we're talking about? And then if you want to jump in on any of this stuff early, you can, and we can just bring up your comments as we're going through. We're going to start with talking about the gender pay gap. We're also going to talk about this thing with Countdown saying that they're doing a price freeze on a bunch of their products. Now, I saw this yesterday, and one of my first responses was, well, let's just see what they freeze. Let's just see what the things actually are. And I was thinking it won't be things that have potential external forces on them to maybe change the price. For example, fruit. Price of fruit goes through the roof if you have a bad season or bad storm that knocks out a couple of orchards of fruit XYZ. So I thought it'll be interesting. It'll probably be the items that they can control the price of, and they're probably doing this as more of a marketing scheme than a helpful scheme. Well, there's some more information that's come out recently about what that is, and we'll have a look at that through the day as well. I mean, Countdown is basically saying any little bit helps, which is true. But we talked yesterday with Jeremy about tax breaks, meaningful tax breaks. And I think you're right that any little bit helps. I mean, if you get, if your $100 tank of gas now costs $99, it's a little bit and it does help, but it's not a meaningful difference. And lots of little bits can make up to a meaningful difference. And I guess it's not the business's responsibility to make the meaningful difference. Maybe it's more government and us personally, but it has made a little bit of a difference, but it feels to me more of a marketing ploy than altruism, if I can put it that way. And also, speaking of that, there is a report out yesterday about electricity prices, the actual system changing and the prices going up, and there being quite a bit of concern around vulnerable people and power bills. And look, I have to tell you, and I don't mean to bang on about this every 10 minutes we do this show that I used to work in radio, but this has been a conversation about people not being able to afford power forever, especially vulnerable people, especially elderly people. The number of stories I've heard speaking to an older audience of people having a bar heater on and having it on in one room, and during the coldest months, basically living in that room and not coming out of it. It's everywhere. This is not new. So these conversations around prices going up again and the vulnerable being risked again is a conversation that's been happening ever since I've been having conversations for 2 decades. And it's just the new iteration of that. I'm not saying that to minimize it. I'm saying that to going like, if there's going to be a solution, how the fuck is there going to be a solution? So anyways, we might even talk about the word mate, but we may not do that today either. We'll see how we go for time. Okay, let's talk about the gender pay gap, shall we? Unless there's anything else to get in before we rip into stuff, George?
Nope.
All right. This is based or started from an exclusive story from One News the other night, and I think we're just pretty much going to play the whole story. We can Sam C to this though, George. If you want to stop at any stage, we'll stop at any stage. And the reason I don't normally introduce a piece by using what the reporter or presenter has said, I normally say what they've said and move on to it. But the actual reporter, Wendy Petrie, in this talks a bit about what the stats are. So I've left it in for this time around, included it. And let's have a listen to what they've got to say.
The numbers show men in general are paid more than women. To fix that, momentum is growing for the reporting of the gender pay gap to be made compulsory. Overseas, making it public reduces pay gaps by 20 to 40%, according to research released exclusively to One News. Australia, Canada and the United Kingdom, plus the European Union, all report their gaps. It shows outsiders that an employer or organisation supports equality and equal pay. It also sees more women hired and promoted within firms. Women on lower incomes benefit most. It's estimated a woman earning the median wage could receive between $12.80 and $35 a week more. Katie Bradford has the exclusive look at the report.
All right, so I wanted to include that because Wendy does a much better job of explaining what the report was about than I would have done. So the idea of businesses to report their gender pay gap, I'm fascinated by this, and I'm fascinated by this topic because, as you will see as we go through this, and one of the things, there's this thing in life where your strength can also be your weakness, right? It can be the thing that hinders you, but also the thing that that helps you. For me, one of the things I do is I want to know why. I want to know why everything, right? There's a gender pay gap, if there is, why? And I'm not saying if because I'm like, okay, boomer, there's no gender pay gap. I'm like, if there is, why is there? And what does it actually mean? So I'm the kind of person that wants to delve a little bit deeper and look into the issues around the headlines, whereas unfortunately in media so much we get the headlines. So businesses to report their gender pay gap, for example, my first question is how, and what does that mean? I'm probably getting a little bit cart before the horse here, but I was thinking about today, like a company reporting their gender pay gap. Does that mean literally listing salaries, or does it mean literally listing the gap between men and women? Does it include the roles they play? And I thought in the media world, for example, there's a company called NZME that runs radio stations. Mike Hosking is probably their highest paid. Well, he will be their highest paid broadcaster. Kerry Woodham is also a very highly paid broadcaster on the same radio station. Do we include that in the difference between the pay gap? And if we do, a guy called Luke Howden, who we talked to a few weeks ago about something else entirely, he also works for the same group, but he works out of Gore. So how do we work out a fair aspect for the difference between Mike Hosking and Kerry Woodham, two very highly paid, high-profile broadcasters, but unquestionably Mike Hosking will be getting paid a lot more as a male, not as a male, but he is a male. But then between Kerry Woodham and Luke from Gore, there'll be a massive disparity in wages there, female to male. Do we list that, and how do we do that? So they're all the things I kind of want to delve into and look into to actually get to what this is about and why. Anything before we continue, George?
It's back to work and back to the office for many, but questions over pay parity remain, with campaigners saying the benefits of mandatory public reporting of gender pay gaps are obvious.
just think about what $35 means a week in the groceries. How many loaves of bread, how many bottles of milk? That's $1,700, how many choices you can make. And again, this is just the impact of discrimination and pay choices.
Some countries require businesses to report figures publicly, others to a government agency.
The power of information is huge. So the power for the individual is huge in terms of they then have a lot more information than in terms of what should they do for their next role, but also power of information for the organisation.
A poll commissioned by the Mind the Gap Coalition found 58% of people thought large companies should share the results of any pay gaps publicly, and 68% thought big businesses should have to share those gaps with any job candidates.
So I wanted to pause again there as well. And I don't want to be accused of whataboutism, but I wonder sometimes of these conversations we're talking about, and we get into a conversation about sort of the bigger picture, the wider screen, and it's a little bit sort of theoretical and maybe not academic, but theoretical. And what I want to know as well about this issue is what's the practical application? So if we look at, large businesses need to report it, and another example, like let's talk about New Zealand Rugby, a large business. Obviously, between male to female within New Zealand Rugby, there'd be huge pay disparity. But then I'd ask the question again, why? And is that fair? And is that okay to have a huge disparity between men and women in the rugby world? The All Blacks versus the Black Ferns, who generates the most income and why? And I think what I just said about the why and the roles that people have taken through society is more. It's not that it's a theoretical conversation. That's the bigger conversation. And I want to go, if women have taken a role that's driven them into lower paying jobs, if that's what this is, how do we then, what's the practical application then to change that? George, I can see you turned your mic off. Do you want to add something in before we keep going?
No, but I guess some of that conversation starts with a bit more data, right? And I guess that's what this report's about, is getting some data so we can better understand the situation.
Yeah. All right. For a bit more of it.
Fighting for gender equality for everything, so why not pay gaps? I think it's about time.
Because this is information that it matters to everyone.
Sort of kind of fair, I think. So if you do want to go into the...
Just a pause. Do you think modelling agencies are going to be looking for this guy's number at the end of this? He's looking pretty, he's working on the roads in Auckland and he's looking pretty good. He could be in the next, I was going to say Hallmark catalog. I was trying to think of a shop, Hallenstein's catalog. He's a pretty good looking young fella. Just saying. Remember there was that guy, guy who had his mug shot in America and he had those blue eyes and the shaved head, and he got out of jail, ended up getting a modeling agency. I just thought, he's another good looking young man that, some agencies might trying to be look up.
Job, you know what you're getting into.
Why not? And why not?
I do think the gender pay gap should be decreased significantly. I don't think there should be compulsion to report.
About 50 companies voluntarily report the information. But Mind the Gap wants the government to move faster and legislate for it urgently.
We have to educate, and I think we can do that right now while it takes time to go down the legislative angle as well. So as we all know, that takes a lot more time.
Some opponents say pay gap reporting will just add to costs and compliance for businesses.
Businesses can play their part in this too.
And so this is actually an investment in having workplaces that are fair and equal. And our conversations with businesses is that they want that as well.
It can also affect morale for those who discover they work somewhere with a big gap.
Individuals, and particularly women, are more likely to leave jobs where they're in an organisation which has a poorer gender pay gap.
Pressure mounting for a change to make work a fairer place. Katie Bradford.
There we go. Any thoughts there, George? You want to jump in first on anything?
No.
So for me, right, it's these words like fair, equitable, and I think most people, if not all people, believe in fairness. But it's the delving into it. And I'm reminded of, there was a conversation, I don't know if it has changed or not changed, several years ago about the professional tennis circuit, where the female competitors were saying our winnings should be the same as the men. And one of the responses given, I'm not saying that the male tennis player said this, it might be more from the commentary, was, the men have to play best of 5, the women play best of 3. Is it fair to pay the same if the workload's not the same? And it was quite a tangible example of going, they have to play, 50% more tennis if you get therefore paid the same. Is that fair as well? So, and look, that wasn't also a commentary on it as well, isn't. I'm saying that's actually, I think, the way to work it out, to figure it out. And the other thing is, when it comes to things like, I mean, I was going to say sports, not this is a sporting conversation, but big business, Mike Hosking was an example, is if someone brings in more money or is more valuable to you, can you pay them more? If someone generates more money, can you pay them more? How do you work out that on a fairness equity? Going back to the All Blacks, I mean, there's no question the All Blacks generate more income for New Zealand rugby than the Black Ferns do. Black Ferns are amazing athletes and incredible, gifted women, and I think have won more World Cups than the men. But if one side generates more income, are they there entitled, as the fair thing that they're entitled to receive more income? I don't know. George?
Yeah, I guess those are all very unique examples, but it'd be interesting to see, I guess, I don't know, more sort of relatable jobs. I guess those seem like sort of outliers that it would be interesting to see public reporting on. But I want to see the pay difference between. They showed someone piloting a ferry there, for example.
Yeah.
That got me thinking about semi-professional jobs, and I want to see companies report their pay gap in those terms, or in terms of jobs like that.
So, and this is the thing for the fairness, and maybe the problem is maybe to see if it's fair or not is never an answerable question. So, whilst I was doing a little bit of looking around on this in the last couple of days, there was an article that I read that talked about even in some female-dominated occupations, there's still a pay gap, and they talked about teaching and how in the teaching profession, men earned more than women, even though women dominate the teaching profession, certainly within primary school. So I'm assuming that's across the board. Talking about school here, not university necessarily. But then I also thought, why do they dominate? I mean, I would assume that means that there are a higher percentage of men than women in management roles. Do women teachers not want to be principals as much as male teachers? I don't know the answers to these, but
these are historically and structurally gendered roles. They've historically been filled by either a male or a female.
Yeah, and I think that's true. So what you're saying is historically,
and very important to the
men have been more often than principal than women, and it's a part of the gender bias.
Yeah.
So now the practical application of that, how do we write that as an example? Do we hire more women to be principals? What if there aren't? What if that's not possible? What if there is also a conversation? And these are lots of questions that I don't have answers to. So let me get that.
But hang on, if you got 30 principals and 70 male principals, we're not saying that it has to be 50 of each. We're saying they should all be paid the same despite their gender.
Yeah, but
their gender shouldn't affect their.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm saying the research is showing. If the researcher says in teaching, in the education profession, men are paid more than women, that would include a beginning teacher, a scale A teacher, a managerial teacher, and a principal. So therefore, if there are more male principals than more male principals and more female beginning teachers, then it's not that that it's tipped, right? It's not that a female principal gets paid less than a male principal. In fact, teaching is probably one of those professions where that doesn't happen because there's a scale. Like, how much a 7-year teacher earns if they're scale A with one management unit, no matter what gender they are, no matter what sex they are. So it would actually be you'd need to have an even amount of, principals, management, because that would be the way in teaching, at least, to get it to be equal, because it's not like a private business where, men in one role and women in the other role are getting paid differently. That doesn't happen in teaching because as I said, what a beginning teacher earns, what a scale A 10-year veteran teacher earns. You know what a Scale A teacher with 2 management unit earns because you can go and look it up. It's all ordered by the ministry. So that would actually be an example where you'd need the same number of beginning teachers, senior teachers, managers, principals to make it even. And look, and I'm not saying this, and I'm not trying to be like the misogynist in this conversation, but is there a conversation?
You don't need to keep defending yourself.
Is there a conversation to be had where it's okay to say maybe women teachers don't want to be principals as much as male teachers, and that's the skew? And if that was the case, what's the practical application for fixing that? Forcing people into a position they don't want to be in? Or
I also agree that when you say what is fair, which is actually, it should be a theoretical question. Like, I don't know how you practically deal with that question, but until you have a conception of what is fair, and I guess this reflects the more sophisticated, I think, answer to all of this, is that you're always going to have a gender pay gap because of the way that work is gendered, right? And I mean, that's reflected in, for example, this article here from Matt Brunig for the Jacobin magazine, that when you look at, for example, the fact that men and women have different labor market characteristics is itself gendered, and that this gendered sorting is still a problem. If you take it all into consideration, including part-time work and volunteer work and all that sort of thing, then it's as it says there in the headline, it's a much more massive gap than we commonly understand it. Now, the point there, though, is that historically, work is gendered, right? That there's carer roles, teaching roles, all those sorts of things, and then the managerial roles that you've been talking about are male. So there's going to automatically be a gender pay gap, because as a society we've decided that this role over here is for some reason more meritable or deserves more money than this role over here. It's a problem with labor at its very core. It's not necessarily a problem of sexism and misogynism, although those things do go hand in hand. But it's a problem of labor exploitation. It's a problem of how we conceive of labor in the first place and work in the first place, and how these are compensated.
I'm interested also just purely in the question here where it says, and this is the same article that I've just grabbed back off you, but the same bit you had highlighted. Then the first side comes back and says the fact that men and women have different labor market characteristics is itself gendered, and that this gendered sorting is still a problem. I see it. I don't want to be the difficult person, but I would say why? Why is it still a problem? Because, and I know that getting into the finer details of individual jobs is not necessarily helpful for the overall conversation, but there are some roles, can I say, labor characteristics that definitely suit, for example, a male more than a female. Jobs that may involve strength, that sort of thing as well. So the areas where I would say those gender sorting is not a problem. And I mean, I guess I could also flip back on myself.
Well, it's just got a fundamental disagreement then, or that you're trying to find these exceptions when obviously these gendered roles are a problem because there's a gender pay gap.
Well, but then again, you get other conversations, and here's other one that came up that actually is an article in Time magazine by a
person who thinks the gender pay gap doesn't exist.
Yeah,
for the reasons you're explaining.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess they're not actually saying it doesn't exist. They're saying that the top line of
It
23%,
should exist. They're saying it should exist. Sorry.
well, they're saying the top line of 23% isn't enough data. They talk about no matter how many times the wage clap is refuted by economists, it always comes back. The bottom line, 23% gender pay gap is simply the difference between the average earnings of all men and women working full-time. It does not account for differences for occupations, positions, education, job tenure, work hours per week. When such relevant factors are considered, the wage gap narrows to the point of vanishing. And I guess the other part of this whole thing we're doing, and we will continue to do, is that, for me at least, there is so much different information out there. I'd like to have more clarity, which is why we bring it to this, and we try and seek more clarity.
And get corporations to publicly report.
Yeah, what would that do though? I mean, I like that.
Give us more data.
But I like that.
I don't get why you got a problem with the report.
I don't have a problem. I'm asking the question, what would that do? Because I like that the report said
give us more data.
It will reduces the pay gap by 20 to 40%. So if the pay gap is currently 23%, that still leaves the pay gap at like 15%. So it doesn't solve the pay gap. It's saying it adds to the part of the solution of the pay gap. I still want to have someone explain to me, someone far more knowledgeable than I, this idea. If you ask the question today, like if we're animals and we look within the animal kingdom, there are certainly roles that within the animal kingdom, within mammals, that the male and the female play, and no one questions that. Is it wrong to ask that question though? Are there roles and skills that suit a male more than a female more, or are we literally exactly the same in how we work and function in this day and age?
We're not, yeah.
Because the only way this works is if we're literally exactly the same.
No,
I'm not disagreeing that it's gender.
Work is gendered.
Sure.
We've come up with this system where we say this gender does this work over here. Oh, by the way, that happens to be paid fuck all. And this gender does this work over here, which in some cases, for very few of the men, gets fuckload of money. We've created that system. It's not an animalistic, intrinsic, natural system.
So you don't
We've
think
created that system.
You don't think that, and let's use the example of, for example, aged care or carers. Obviously, hugely, it's probably 99% female. Yeah. In an ideal world, that would be 50-50. You don't think there's any possibility that it's females would more naturally lean towards caring for people in those situations and males wouldn't?
I don't have a problem with that at all.
So what are we talking about?
They should be paid more.
Okay, well that's the next question, yeah.
Well, I come at this from a perspective of the work, right? I'm not an expert on gender and all this sort of stuff, right? I more think that when we talk about fairness in the workplace, it should be a sort of more universal conversation. But yeah, when it does come to the gender pay gap, we should look at why, as a society, we say that this job over here is of less merit than this job over here. And it usually comes back to a very soulless economic argument that I cannot extract enough profit from this carer over here, therefore they are worth less. Yeah. Whereas over here, I can extract way more profit from this person.
Yeah.
Therefore, I pay them for the labor I extract.
Yeah, we're on the same page with that, 100%. I'm completely on board with what you're saying for that example. And then I will ask, not to negate what you're saying, because I agree with you that, you know, a carer looking after a person with Alzheimer's in a home is as valuable to society, if not more so, than someone generating a lot of money for a media company. Probably more so, to be honest. So we're on the same page with that. But then I still ask the practical application of paying that person on one side $250,000 a year and that other person getting $21 an hour.
It's a very difficult answer. Yeah, you're right. Because it takes a total sort of fundamental, reconfiguring of stuff, because there's many sort of layers of history and ideology going on there.
I mean, look, because it's, even though we seem to kind of there together a little bit and miss each other, but we're on the same page. I'm on the same page with what you're saying. You're talking about valuing and paying people for what they're worth. and what the work and valuing the work they're doing. 100%. I'm not negating that by
needs
then
to
asking
become a different
how do you then
calculation
pay
of
for it
value.
is my question. And that's not my right-wing talking point going, no, how do you pay for free healthcare? I mean, literally, the money would need to come from somewhere. I'm not saying that it shouldn't, which would be the right-wing talking point. I'm saying how do we pay the carer more? How does that work?
You asked for my ideal, so
yeah.
I was
no,
like, we need to
I'm
conceive of value differently, not how much profit can I extract from this worker. We need to think of value differently. I guess
let's wrap up with this. This is from the Mind the Gap group that we're in that article we just shared, the piece, which actually surprised me quite a bit. I'm not surprised by the Pākehā man earning more than most, but in America, I think, and we can Google this, I haven't done this yet, but I think the Asian population in America are the highest earners per capita. So it just surprised me to see that for every dollar a Pākehā man earns, an Asian man's earned 86 cents. I'd be interested to look at the stats as well. It does say it's from the Household Labour Force Survey. But there are some marks that have come up from the Mind the Gap people, and that's, I guess we wanted to put that out there. I wanted to put that out there so people could then see what at least the Mind the Gap people are talking about it, and how that would work.
Yeah. Well, we see that the ethnic dimension to this as well here with the statistics from Mind the Gap NZ, and I guess some of the passion behind this for me is from a sort of debate that we've been interested in, I guess, on the show, is the sort of debates within the left, right? That how what we see as important, right, is should we, spend our time talking about the gender pay gap, or should we actually be questioning work and what is fair, and paying people in the working class better, or as I've been saying, reconfiguring how we value all that to start off with.
I guess I think about that, and look, as I said, I agree. I'm on board. I'm with you. I want to join that boat and make sure that we in society are aware of the value of the jobs and the people that these are. My concern is, and we're going to talk a little about electricity prices soon, as that conversations then go on forever and no application is put in place to change it. And I'm not saying you and I can do anything about that, which is why when I keep coming back to the application, how does that apply? What's the application for this? It's actually it sounds like what the difference between you and me is maybe the crux of the conversation for you is what you've just said about changing the whole mindset, and maybe the crux of it for me is how does that carer earn more money? How do we get them more money? How do we pay them $40 an hour rather than $21 an hour, or whatever would be considered fair? And maybe together, George, you can be my Batman and I'll be your Robin, or you can be my Robin and I'll be my Batman. And if we take the double approach, we'll help figure this thing out for some other people. Maybe.
It's funny. I was thinking about this with the supermarket thing, and I know maybe you don't want to talk about the supermarkets.
No, we can go. Let's go there now after you've done this. Yep.
I was thinking of like change and that sort of thing, and how to put pressure on these companies. And back in the day, you would have a full shutdown of, you'd have a general strike, right?
Mm-hmm.
France still does this sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's sort of gone out of vogue, but you have a general strike where the country stops working, for example. Imagine if we could shut down Countdown around New Zealand now. And then I was thinking of the obvious sort of reaction people would have to that. They'd think of the stabbing in Dunedin and all the hardship and stuff that Countdown staff have gone throughout lockdown and that sort of thing. But if we're linking arms with the Countdown staff and saying no to Countdown executives, then and united in that message, then bam, there's some action that could take place.
Yeah.
But then you're told, no, that's unrealistic, how are you gonna blah blah blah, and what about the blah blah blah? And it's like, hang on, these guys are making $1 million a day. Like, fuck them, let's sort it out.
Fuck you, Countdown. Fuck you.
Countdown.
Well, let's get into that, shall we? Let's talk about the next conversation, because we had a press release earlier in the week from Countdown talking about how they're going to save New Zealand's money. I'm joking. From Monday, 9th of May, Countdown is freezing the price of more than 500 quote-unquote essential, they haven't quoted, I'm quoting, unquote, products to give New Zealanders more certainty on food prices as the country moves into winter. Countdown customers will find staples such as diced tomatoes, butter, cheese, sugar, flour, shaved ham, hot roast chicken, carrots, and pumpkin at the same low price all through the colder months, no matter what happens to inflation clauses. Yada, 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 yada. I read that yesterday and went, okay, so this is a press release. It's not going to make a huge difference. They're not going to include many foods in there that are actually particularly useful to us, and it's going to be all the foods they can control and maybe the foods they already have pretty good margins on. So should there be a price fluctuation, then they can absorb it. Today, and the reason we brought this back is today, there is some criticism coming out towards Countdown about their deal. Questions over Countdown winter prices freeze on essentials. I'll just read the first couple of bits. It says Countdown is freezing the prices of more than 600 essential, that is in speech marks, items over winter. But one health expert says the list is dominated by highly processed food and it misses the mark. So what are the things we would like to see money saved on? I would say essentials. I would say fruits, veggies, dairy, meat, the things that we need to survive. Chips, chocolates, that kind of stuff, not so much a big deal. Let's have a look at the list. So this is the list based, there's a link here if you want to look at it yourself right there from the press release. This is the list that goes out. Coming over purely to the categories, this is all of the items on the list. You can see in the fruit and veggie department, there's 3 items that they've frozen. And the 3 items are bag of carrots, pumpkin, bag of onions. Okay. Going to the meat and seafood, there's 7 items. You go, oh, cool. Maybe there's, maybe there's a mince, maybe there's a steak, maybe there's a chicken. Let's see what's in there. Yeah, in there, it's all salmon. That's it, salmon. So think about your 68-year-old, your 75-year-old pensioner going with her, $27 left for her food, and she's going to go in and buy her $10 salmon, which will last her 2 meals. I don't think so. But if you're a fan of salmon, sorted for the next wee while. It's just a marketing ploy, in my opinion, for what they're doing. Even going into the fridge and deli, you can see, there's some things in there that's good, but it's not items that are, it's $5.80 worth of butter. There you go. You're not going to be paying $6 for butter, $5.80 worth of butter. Prepared meals, 28 out of all of the ones in that category. So I guess on one level, I do want to kind of say it's better than nothing, but it is certainly more a marketing scheme than altruism. And I'll tell you something as well. I've done some work with some groups in Dunedin who sell food. Now, as you can see, I've actually deleted the name of the group that I was working with, and the reason is that it's a group that I do still work with, but this was done under
the show.
This was done under this was done under previous owners, and this may not be relevant to them today. But I used to do so. In other words, this is not prices today. This was done probably 18 months ago, and the new owners of this company, this is not necessarily the path they're taking. But I work with a company, and I worked with a company that has very good value food in Dunedin. I have another hat on that I do some marketing for some companies and help them with their advertising. And you can see we went around, and every kind of week to 6 months, we did month to 6 weeks, I should say. We did a comparison shop of pretty standard items that you would have, and it's all fruit and veggie that we have in there. And you would see that it would come back, and these were the people I was working with. They were $55 for there, and then on New World were the most expensive, $80 for theirs. Countdown, second most expensive, $75, and then this is Pack and Save South Dunedin. Now, Pack and Save South Dunedin is interesting because Pack and Save always come out as cheapest on the surveys, and Pack and Save South Dunedin always come out as the cheapest Pack and Save. So, but you can see already that Countdown putting prices on things and putting freezers on things, they're already one of the most expensive supermarkets. So that's what I'm saying is, and this is just fruit and veggie, but this is indicative of the overall costs. You can already see that whilst they might be doing something little, they are already a company that can absorb a little bit of movement around anyway.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to say sort of thanks, but I also want to say to us, the public, just take if there's some things on your item that you are your favorite things and you can get them now cheaper, that's great. But remember, while you're in there, their fruit and veggie are at least the second most expensive of the research that I've done, right? So you may actually, if you went in there and got a trolley full, you may end up paying more than if you went to a cheaper place overall who doesn't have the price freeze on. So it's absolutely a marketing scheme. It's to get you in the door and get you to pay their other prices for their other more expensive items. In my honest held belief opinion, just to make sure I don't get sued. George.
Yeah, the other interesting thing about this is that as Consumer NZ, and I recommend people look at their sort of reaction to the story, as they've been saying, Countdown, in terms of costs when it comes to those things, they're arranged in 3-month blocks with the suppliers that they buy off, and so therefore Countdown isn't taking a costs loss, right, for this freeze in a way. It's just pausing the what do you call it, premium or whatever, the thing you put on top of the cost. It's just freezing that, right? So the next 3 months they're already sorted financially. Not to mention the $1 million that I want to keep bringing up, excess profit that we saw from whoever did the research findings the other month.
Well, and just point out that they say $1 million, and we've been told it should be $500,000. I mean, the world average is 6% profit. In New Zealand, supermarkets are making between 12 and 14% profit. So they could be making $500,000 a day profit. I love it that you're such a Marxist you couldn't find the word profit in your head. Profit.
I've been saying it all day.
But yeah, sorry, I didn't interrupt you. I figured George, keep going. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's why it's just annoying. You know, you have who was it, Steve Mills, the commercial director for whatever on RNZ, whinging about fuel prices and this sort of thing, and it comes back to that I wish I could remember the word they used, but they used like disgusting extra profit that Countdown is making, radical profit or something enormous. Like on top of, like, you know, you think of, you know, the executive, you know, making sure that they've got a nice little package, and then you times that by 10 sort of thing. Nice little package, yeah. I saw you liked that.
Sorry, you have to remember at all times, I really am a 9-year-old boy, George. You just have to remember that at all times. Packet. Yeah. So look, I mean, I guess on one level, kudos or props to them for doing a little bit. But please, everybody, just remember it's a marketing scheme. It's not altruism. You're very likely to go there, and because you're there, you'll get other things. I mean, it's basically companies run things called loss leaders. Most of you probably know what loss leaders are. Where basically they try and get you through the door with something that they're selling for less than cost, and then while you're there, you fill up your trolley with a whole bunch of other stuff, and they make massive profits. So, I don't know. Do I want to congratulate them? I mean, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to congratulate them. Maybe I just want to. No, maybe I just want to say, just be aware it's a marketing ploy to get you through the door and nothing else. It's not altruism. So, yeah, that's what I want to say. So now, cool. Yeah, fuck Countdown. Say it again. All right. Should we have a look at? But this is more like, oh my God, this is a bit of a PSA, I guess, because I don't know if we've got very much to add to this after all of this conversation. But there was an item last night on One News talking about electricity prices. Although, if you're not aware, I guess what we want to do is highlight the changes to the electricity system and what's coming, what's just been passed. So let's just have a look at the item first of all, and then we can, it's only a couple of minutes, it's not even that, 90 seconds, and then we can have a chat about it. There's honestly not too much more to add to this, but this is, yeah, as I say, maybe more of a PSA to let you know what's going on in the electricity sector at the moment.
For some of our most vulnerable, power bills are on the way up.
Certainly for a lot of older people, they can't afford to pay extra, $10 on the bill.
It's set to be much more than that, not just for older people.
Yes, that's correct. There has been some changes.
Consumer New Zealand's being flooded.
Yes, that's correct.
Our power bills are split in two. There's a component for the infrastructure, which is the power lines and the power poles. that deliver the electricity to you. And then there's the charge for the electricity itself.
It's that first bit, the fixed charge, that's changing for low power users, and it's just the start.
Currently, you're paying around, on a low fixed charge, you'll be paying around $110 a year. By year 5, that will increase to around $660 per year.
Wow.
Up from 30 cents a day to $1.80 a day by 2026.
So we're really worried.
Worried because the people she supports are too.
Some of the older people I know, they can't even afford to buy a new pair of socks in wintertime.
The changes come after a review recommending them. They're supposed to make things better for more people.
The system is unfair, which is why it needs to change.
Was it good to lift power bills for low power users smack in the bang of a cost of living crisis?
So for 60% of energy users and actually some of our most vulnerable energy consumers, it will actually result in lower power bills.
Please reconsider this decision.
So this has potential to exacerbate inequality and energy hardship.
Not every retailer's lifting its fixed charges. The advice, make sure you're with the best one for you. Kim Baker-Wilson, One News.
There you go. Yeah, actually, to be honest with you, I'd sort of missed some of those numbers when I watched it the first time around, but going from $100 a year to $600 a year, that's significant. And if you're on a fixed income, especially a low fixed income, I guess that's what they're saying, $10 a week can make a difference. So after you've gone to the supermarket to count down and bought your salmon, which is now frozen in price, I'm sure you'll be able to afford the extra $10 a week for your power as well. It's a tough one. And I think we've talked about Winston a couple of times this week, Uncle Winnie. This would also be a time to perhaps propose. They've always talked about that gold card being something more than basically a storage of other benefits. Benefits meaning benefits to the person, not a wins type thing. And maybe this is the time to actually use that and bring that into being something meaningful. We've talked about meaningful change and meaningful advantages a bit this week, and actually being able to use it, especially for retired people, maybe the community services card for vulnerable people, maybe the gold card for retired people, as a way to get discounts or eliminations from these kinds of increased fees. Because isn't that ultimately what we want to do, is look after the vulnerable? The society is only as strong as the weakest link. And if the vulnerable are doing poorly, then our society sucks. So basically, our society sucks. George.
There's these sort of stop gaps, I guess, in terms of benefits. A few weeks ago, I mentioned that the winter energy payment scheme is starting back up for those on any of the sort of work and income things, and superannuation and those sorts of things. There's extra $20 to $30 a week. But yeah, surely this is just things like this, or I could say let's open this up to others to apply for example, people with part-time jobs, etc. These are all just kind of sort of temporary measures. Really, the problem is that we shouldn't be beholden to we shouldn't have to react to some prices enforced upon us. It should be the other way around, that we should have some sort of control over, otherwise it's just sort of like God coming along and deciding, oh yeah, $600 this year, by the way. There's sort of, you're not getting better power from us.
Yeah.
You're not getting worse power from us. It's exactly the same. You got the same heat pump. You're going to be just as sort of mildly warm this year, but here's 6 times the bill.
I'm going to put your screen back up, so don't put your porn back on just yet. That's a pretty good starting list, though. Like you're saying that the part-time workers and stuff could be included, but that's I mean, if you think about the vulnerable people in New Zealand, that's a pretty good starting list.
Yeah, I mean, I get this.
If you were a part-time worker and you weren't earning enough, then you're probably going to be in one of these things anyway, getting some kind of help. So, I mean, there's always going to be people who fall through the cracks, and they're always important for us to, as much as we can, look after and try and find those people and try and plug those gaps. But from a starting point, that's a pretty good list.
Yeah, for sure. Like I get that. Like I'm a part-time worker who also gets a benefit. So definitely, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, totally. There's probably a lot of opportunities that people don't really realize when it comes to winds. And I will have to say, being someone who's been dealing with winds since I was a child on a independent youth benefit back in the day, they have got sort of better in terms of their interaction with you when it comes to calling. You still have to wait an hour or so to talk to them, but they seem to have got better in their attitude. I mean, they'll still admit to you that they don't trust a thing you're saying sometimes, which is what a case manager said to me once. But I feel like there's, under this Labor government, been some sort of general sort of attitude changes within WINS.
Kim says, reminds me to organise some firewood. It is, someone who in my adult life in the last decade has moved from the top of the North Island to sort of the bottom of the South Island. It is interesting to see how different people deal with different power issues as well. And
sorry, Jason's made a point that I meant to make after talking about these sort of temporary measures, is that it's corporate welfare by second hand, right? That we're giving the winter energy payment, which goes to the power companies, which are stacking on the prices year after year. So yeah, I just thought I'd point that out. Thanks, Jason.
It's like you see examples of that. What they call it, the underemployed people who might work 20, 30, 40 hours a week and still don't have quite enough to live off, and then they get given help. You see this in places like Walmart in America. They get given help by the government, and that enables them to keep working for this corporate organization who aren't paying them enough. That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Hey, what's anything else to wrap up here before I say what's going on for the weekend, George?
No, nothing for the weekend. I want to sort of get out and about. Apparently the weather's going to be all right in Dunedin, and hopefully not, spend it in a heat pumped lounge. As nice as that is, but I should probably get out and about in the nature and all that sort of thing.
You guys should take a rat test and come and see us and play some poker this weekend and sit in front of the fire for a while. That's what you should do.
That sounds like a very good idea. And also taking the rat test sounds like a good idea, because I have had this, like, for the last few days, this thing where I'm like, fuck, what is that feeling? And I wake up and then I get a headache and I'm like, that all very good ideas.
No, we're in conversations at the moment between me and my kid's mother about how we're dealing with, because I've said this again, not to get in this conversation will go for another 40 minutes if we start this, George, but schools down here, in my opinion, are doing a very piss poor job. They've reduced and released kids from wearing masks. They're not enforcing them anymore, certainly the two schools that my kids go at. But again, yesterday, the numbers of new cases were 3 times what they should be for a safe level. So we're just talking about when the kids go between the houses, and now that everyone's back at school, what do we do for sleepovers and this and that and the other? And actually, to be honest, rat testing is what we're going to do, and it's all we can do. It's like if one of the kids' friends wants to come over, then they can rat test before they come. I've got about 30 of them sitting upstairs. And whilst that's not the be all and end all, because I think about, if you didn't test positive, there's got to be a 1 minute differential from when you wouldn't test positive to when you do test positive. So whilst it doesn't actually protect you long term, it's the only tools we've got right now. And I think the experience I've had with them, when someone in my house brought COVID in, they were negative the night before and positive the day after. I kind of go, well, if someone's coming around for a few hours, it's the best tool we've got right now. Even if someone's coming for a sleepover or whatever, if it's the best tool we've got right now, whilst it's not a guarantee. And like I was talking to someone the other day, if people just understood to get on with your life now and wear a mask, this would be a lot closer to being over. The problem is people are now getting on with their life and not wearing masks again. And that's why this fucking thing is going to hang around for a lot longer. So I should bring up that thing again from Rise of Planet of the Apes. Should we finish with that? Just to show people again, this is what's going to happen. But that's it. Get on with your life, live your life, do what you want to do, and wear a mask. And then we won't be in, you've still got it, bro. There we go. We won't be in this situation with viruses going around the world still. Pretty simple, really. And it lands in Europe and goes, there you go.
Paris, and then some in the middle of it. It's geographically, I've got a problem with this. I don't know.
Why? Lands in Africa?
Because there's not like a central hub like that in Central African Republic.
Should have gone to Johannesburg.
And then it goes to I reckon that's like Delhi, so that's accurate, and then Beijing or whatever. So, but the Africa one, yeah.
Okay, we'll contact them and get them to change it.
We'll dig into this.
I agree. Take a rat if you're not feeling well. Second case of COVID for me in 6 weeks.
Fuck.
Emperor, that's terrible. And this is much worse. Okay, so we weren't going to talk about this, and we're not going to belabor the point, but so everybody's clear, the government advice right now is not correct. Government is saying one thing, epidemiologists are saying another. So you're all clear. You are pretty much safe for a month after you recover from COVID. Between 1 month and 3 months, there's no guarantees. And most epidemiologists are saying that your protection, your superhero power, will wane definitely between 3 and 6 months. So by 6 months, you basically are guaranteed to have no coverage. I heard some fucking idiot the other day saying, oh, I'm over COVID now. I'm protected for 18 years. They literally said that. The mis and disinformation. But what the epidemiologists are saying is you're safe for a month. 1 to 3 months, we can't really tell. But what we can tell is there is definite waning between 3 and 6 months. So, Emperor, I feel so sorry for you. I wish you all the best. I hope you get better. But I'm reading more and more of these headlines about people testing positive twice in 6 weeks. And now that the government's reduced all of these, reduced it to orange. For example, the university students that came into Dunedin in March and just all of them got infected. What is that? April, we're now 6 to 8 weeks later. So all of those 18, 19, 20-year-olds who probably think they're superheroes are all now up for getting reinfected. That's why I say I'm fucked with this government, especially what they've done that looks like it's a massive Auckland sort of focus, that they've released the whole country because Auckland's doing okay, yet some of us are far worse than I think what we're being told about. Anyway, don't want to end too much on a sour note, but Emperor, we wish you well. And let us also say, Emperor, if you're feeling up to it and you're going to join us next week, we are going to be broadcasting from midday. Right, because this is a soft launch, the things we're doing, we're going to just change it around a little bit. So next week, we're going to be live from midday till 1. And the week after that, we're going to be live at 10 p.m. So we're just playing with this a bit. We're seeing what kind of works, seeing what happens. So next week, Monday, join us at midday. The following week, join us at 10 p.m. Right, going to bed, jump to bed, put us on your iPhone or whatever next to your bed, hang out with us. Join in the conversation, but that's what we're going to do over the next 2 weeks. So next week, again, it's midday. Join us from midday Monday for the next show. Anything else you want to wrap up with there, George?
Nope.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us today. All the best. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for joining and thanks for watching. I wish you all the best. Have a good weekend. I want to do literally nothing this weekend. I want to relax and chill out and have some downtime, other than obviously putting the fire on and playing some poker, George. We'll talk to you about that after the broadcast. So all the best, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week at midday on Monday.